यशोदानन्दन व्रजजन रञ्जन यशोदानन्दन व्रजजन रञ्जन यमुना तीर वनचारी यमुना तीर वनचारी जय राधा माधव पुण्य बिहारी गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी गोपीजन वल्लभ गिरिवरधारी यशोदानन्दन व्रजजन रञ्जन यशोदानन्दन व्रजजन रञ्जन यमुना तीर वनचारी यमुना तीर वनचारी जय राधा माधव पुण्य बिहारी जय राधा माधव पुण्य बिहारी जय परमहंस परिव्राजकाचार्य सुखदेव स्मारक सिद्धांत सरस्वती गोस्वामी भगवान की जय अनंत कोटि वैष्णव की जय रामाचार्य श्री हरिदास ठाकुर की जय प्रेम से कहो श्री कृष्ण नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर शिवाचार्य गौर भक्ति की जय श्री राधा कृष्ण भो गोपनाथ श्याम कुंड राधा कुंड गिरिवर्धन की जय वृंदावन धाम की जय नवदीप धाम की जय गंगा माँ की जय जमुना माँ की जय द्वारका धाम की जय स्वामी तो भक्तवृंद की जय और ग्लोरी टू और ग्लोरी टू थैंक यू वेरी मच
Hare Krishna, dear devotees, please accept our humble obeisances. All glories to Jagad Guru Srila Prabhupada, all glories to Gurudev, all glories to Samuel Vaishnavi devotees, and all glories to our revered speaker for today, His Grace Mukunda Datta Prabhu. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you so much for being here, Prabhu.
Thank you for inviting me.
I think this might be like your second or third time here.
It's at least the third time.
Yeah, this is the third time. Thank you so much for honoring our invitation and sharing your love and wisdom with us. I may do a little bit introduction about your humble self to the devotees at the end of the class, by which time we might have had many more devotees around than we do have now. So we may put the verse on the screen and then you take it over from here, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Dandavats. Jai Shri Prabhupada.
Jai.
Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya. Naram Chaiva Narottamam. Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayamudirayet. Nashtaprayeshu Bhatreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya. Bhagavad-gyuttama shloke bhaktir-bhavati naishtiki Krishne swadhamopagate dharma-jnana-adibhissaha Kalau nashtadrishamesha Puranarko dhunoditaha. This is Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 2, Chapter 9. And we're on text number 4 today. So I will just recite the Sanskrit and then we can hear the translation and purport and discuss. Atma tattva vishuddhyartham yad aha bhagavan ratam brahmane darshayan rupam avyalika vratadritaha. That means, O King, the personality of Godhead, being very much pleased with Lord Brahma, because of his non-deceptive penance in Bhakti Yoga, presented his eternal and transcendental form before Brahma. And that is the objective goal for purifying the conditioned soul. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Atma Tattva is the science of both God and the living entity. Both the Supreme Lord and the living entity are known as Atma. The Supreme Lord is called Paramatma, and the living entity is called the Atma, the Brahma, or the Jiva. So both the Paramatma and the Jivatma, being transcendental to the material energy, are called Atma. So Shukdev Goswami explains this verse with the aim of purifying the truth of both the Paramatma and the Jivatma. Generally, people have many wrong conceptions about both of them. The wrong conception of the Jivatma is to identify the material body with the pure soul. And the wrong conception of the Paramatma is to think him on an equal level with the living entity. But both misconceptions can be removed by one stroke of Bhakti Yoga. Just as in the sunlight, both the sun and the world and everything within the sunlight are properly seen. In the darkness, one cannot see the sun, nor himself, nor the world. But in the sunlight, one can see the sun, himself, and the world around him. Srila Shukdev Goswami therefore says that for purification of both wrong conceptions, the Lord presented his eternal form before Brahmaji, being fully satisfied by Brahma's non-deceptive vow of discharging Bhakti Yoga. Except for Bhakti Yoga, any method for realization of Atma Tattva, or the science of Atma, will prove deceptive in the long run. In the Bhagavad Gita, the Lord says that only by Bhakti Yoga can one know him perfectly, and then one can enter into the science of God. Brahmaji undertook great penance in performing Bhakti Yoga, and thus he was able to see the transcendental form of the Lord. His transcendental form is 100% spiritual, and one can see him only by spiritualized vision after proper discharge of tapasya, or penance, in pure Bhakti Yoga. The form of the Lord manifested before Brahma is not one of the forms with which we have experience in the material world. Brahmaji did not perform such severe types of penance just to see a form of material production. Therefore, the question by Maharaj Parikshit about the form of the Lord is answered. The form of the Lord is Satchit Ananda, or eternal, full of knowledge and full of bliss. But the material form of the living being is neither eternal, nor full of knowledge, nor blissful. That is the distinction between the form of the Lord and that of the conditioned soul. The conditioned soul, however, can regain his form of eternal knowledge and bliss simply by seeing the Lord by means of Bhakti Yoga. The summary is that due to ignorance, the conditioned soul is encaged in the temporary varieties of material forms. But the Supreme Lord has no such temporary form like the conditioned souls. He is always possessed of an eternal form of knowledge and bliss, and that is the difference between the Lord and the living entity. One can understand this difference by the process of bhakti yoga. Brahma was then told by the Lord the gist of Srimad Bhagavatam in 4 original verses. Thus, Srimad Bhagavatam is not a creation of the mental speculators. The sound of Srimad Bhagavatam is transcendental, and the resonance of Srimad Bhagavatam is as good as that of the Vedas. Thus, the topic of the Srimad Bhagavatam is the science of both the Lord and the living entity. Regular reading or hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam is also performance of bhakti yoga, and one can attain the highest perfection simply by the association of Srimad Bhagavatam. Both Shukdev Goswami and Maharaj Parikshit attained perfection through the medium of Srimad Bhagavatam. Om Jnana Timirantasya Jnananjana Shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namah. Shri Chaitanya Manobhishtam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam. Vandeham Shri Guroho Shri Yutaparagamalam Shri Gurun Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahaganaragunatham Vitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Savadhutam Parijana Sahitam Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padam Sahaganadata Shri Vishakhan Vitamscha. He Krishna Karuna Sindho Dinabandho Jagatpate Gopesha Gopika Kanta Radha Kanta Namostate. Tapta Kanchana Gaurangi Radhe Vrindavaneshwari Vrishabhanu Sute Devi Pranamami Haripriye. Vancha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripasindhubhya Evacha Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha. Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shivatari Gaur Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Madgavirapi Gopala Swikuryat Kripaya Yadi Tavai Vasam Payaha Pitwa Prashyayustat Priyajanaha. At the end of his 10th canto commentary on the Srimad Bhagavatam, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur prays in this way. He says, My dear Lord, Gopala, Lord of the cows, protector of the cows, please accept my words also as your cows. Only then will they produce sweet milk to be relished by your pure devotees. So we are invoking that sentiment in this beginning of this class as well. Here we have very important instructions. Atma Tattva Vishuddhi Artham Yad Aha Bhagavan Rutam Brahmane Darshayam Rupam Avyadika Vratatritaha. O King, the personality of Godhead, being very much pleased with Lord Brahma because of his non-deceptive penance in Bhakti Yoga, presented his eternal and transcendental form before Brahma, and that is the objective goal for purifying a conditioned soul. So we have some short comments here, summary just by Madhvacharya. He says, Yato Bhagavaduktam Pramanam Atastaduktam Puranam Tvat Prashnananam Uttaratvena Vakshye. What Bhagavan spoke long ago is evidence, and so I will speak that in answer to your questions. He's summarizing here. Sridhar Swami gives us a longer purport. He says, because of the specification that there's no particular connection between the soul and the body, between the Atma and the body. In this connection, it was said even of the Supreme Lord. Maharaj Parikshit was asking things such as, how do we become liberated by serving him? And also he asked the question, Asid yet, beginning Asid yet Uttarat Padmam, which in effect was, what is the difference between the Lord's body and the bodies of others? Very good question. So this is only for the purpose of purifying the Atma, or the Jiva's reality, Tattva, the elements that comprise our conditional existence, we can say. It's for factual knowledge of the truth of our situation. And what was Brahmaji's worship? Whatever austerity and so on that the Lord told Brahma to do. What happened as a result of that? Here the word ritam in this verse means truth, satyam. The Lord showed his true form. The cause of that vision is that the Lord was served by the austerity of Brahma's non-duplicit vow. This is the gist. There is connection with the body, a false form, only by dint of the jiva's ignorance. But through the yoga maya of the Lord, spiritual form and pastimes will manifest. That is the great distinction between the Lord's form and our form as conditioned souls. Thus, liberation occurs through worshiping him. Now, he's quoted here, Asid yet udarat padmam. That's actually the second canto, last chapter, chapter 8, text number 8. And there the question is raised. If the Supreme Personality of Godhead, from whose abdomen the lotus stem sprouted, is possessed of a gigantic body according to his own caliber and measurement, then what is the specific difference between the body of the Lord and those of common living entities? It's a good question, because Shukdev Goswami has been discussing so many things, among them the universal form, and so Maharaj Parikshit was a little bit doubtful. So he raised this question, and Sridhar Swami has answered it nicely. Jiva Goswami likewise says that because he was worshipped by sincere devotion, the Lord revealed his true spiritual form and spoke to Brahma the 4 essential verses of the Srimad Bhagavatam, that is Chatushloki Bhagavatam, later on in this chapter, beginning with text number 33. 4 verses, they encapsulate the entire teaching of the Srimad Bhagavatam. But though, of course, those verses are not very easy to understand, and there's a lot of commentary on those verses. But the Lord spoke this to Lord Brahma because he was pleased with Lord Brahma. Why was he pleased with Lord Brahma? He wanted to give knowledge about himself, but specifically he was pleased because Lord Brahma performed this avyalika adara, which means respect or devotion, veneration that was non-duplicit. He was honest, in other words. So Jiva Goswami says, directly showing the form of the Supreme Brahman, the truth, and enjoying in his glory, the Lord spoke to Brahma. He taught him the 4 verses, which he revealed by realized sound in order to define the true nature of the jiva, that is to say, Atma Tattva. And by that, he would be able to understand the Lord's difference from the jiva. Or another way to see it is that he taught the truth about himself, Bhagavan, Atma Tattva, or the cause of such mercy is mentioned that the Lord had been worshipped with devotion. Avyalika vratadritaha. We'll discuss that term. It's very, very significant in this verse a little bit later on. So the question concerning the form of the Lord is in this way addressed. Now, Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur has also given us his own commentary. He's also summarized some of what Sridhar Swami has already said. What is there that is beyond time and Maya to which one should become attached? This is a question. And this verse answers that question. The Lord spoke for giving knowledge, Vishuddhi, about his own nature, Atma Tattva. Or he spoke for the purification of the components like Chitta, that is consciousness, which is one of the tattvas or elements of the Jivatma. You can say Atma Tattva refers to these because the word Atma means many things. Prabhupada has hinted this already. It means not only the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but it means even the small living entities, the Anu Atmas or the Jivatmas. And in fact, Atma means not just spirituality as well, but Atma can also mean the mind, and Atma can mean the body. So what are we talking about when we're talking about Atma Tattva, the truth of the Atma? Well, it means all these things all at once. So Vishuddhi Atma Tattva, for the purpose of purification in the form of knowledge of one's own reality as a conditioned soul, we're discussing these things. So Atma Tattva. We know about the Lord explains the truth of himself, or the truth of the jiva, or even the truth of our material bodies and minds and our conditional existence. All these things will become clear. And it becomes clear just as when the sun is present, all those things that were previously invisible or enveloped in darkness, they become visible to us. So in the same way, all these things become clear. Showing Brahma his form, which was true or spiritual, Ritam, he spoke the 4 verses of the Bhagavatam. What was the cause? The cause is that he was worshipped with sincere bhakti. This is that phrase again. Avyalika vrata, a non-deceptive vow, as Prabhupada translates it. The word yat does not relate with a correlative tat in a later verse. The meaning is expressed by Sridhar Swami, when Sridhar Swami has said, the jiva is related to the body by ignorance, that's by avidya, and by the yogamaya of the Lord's form of knowledge and pastimes appear. This is the great difference expressed here. So this answers the question about the difference between the body of the Lord and the jiva. That was, as we heard already, Sridhar Swami has raised that question. Okay, so we wanted to discuss this term, very, very significant, probably the most significant term in the whole verse. Avyalika adrita. Adrita, it comes from the verb adri, which means to respect or to carefully attend to or to honor someone or to worship. Later on, it comes to mean also love. In effect, it means bhakti, as Prabhupada has translated in his purport. And what kind of adrita are we talking about here? Avyalika. Avyalika. Non-duplicit. Vyalikam. What does vyalika mean? Vyalika means false or not truthful, lying, hypocritical. These are definitions that we find elsewhere throughout the Bhagavatam. Anything that is displeasing or may cause pain or uneasiness, this is also vyalika. Any kind of pain or grief, that's found in Mahabharata, in the Kavya, and in the Puranas. A falsehood, a lie, a fraud, again, same sources. Something disagreeable, something painful, offensive, or strange. This is in the dictionaries. Something improper, something unfit, or an evil person even. So a transgression, an offense, or a misdeed. You get the idea. This is vyalika. So Lord Brahmaji's worship or respect or attention to the Supreme Lord was completely free of these things, because the word is used here. Avyalika, not vyalika, avyalika. The prefix a negates things in Sanskrit. Okay, so Brahma has very honestly tried his best to worship the Lord. And what is the form that worship took? Sridhar Swami has already told us, and others have also told us. The form of the Lord Brahmaji's worship consisted of following the instructions he received from the Lord. And what was that instruction he received? That's also we see when Lord Brahma was in the lotus stem, wondering what to do when everything was black, as we've described already. Darkness, you cannot see anything around you. You cannot understand anything. So what happened? The Lord is very kind and gave him the instruction, tapa, do austerity. Prabhupada emphasizes in his purport a couple of times, I think, that he says that one has to execute devotional service with penance. It has to be a little difficult. That's real, that is the proof, we can say, of genuine bhakti. If you're willing to take some trouble, there should be some commitment here, in other words. There should be some little bit of pain involved. We say in English, no pain, no gain. So that is tapasya. And Prabhupada is translated in his word for word here. He says, without any deceptive motive, vrata adritaha. He was worshiping the Lord with a vow. Vrata means a vow. What kind of vow? The vow to perform devotional service under all circumstances. When we try to take to bhakti yoga as conditioned souls, we approach a spiritual master and we promise that we will follow 4 vows, 5 vows actually. The first one is that we always have to chant 16 malas of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And Prabhupada told us, this is the most important of all the instructions that the spiritual master gives. Under no circumstances should we ever stop chanting Hare Krishna or not follow our vow to chant 16 rounds. It doesn't mean it's okay to sometimes chant 14 rounds or 12 rounds. You have to chant 16 rounds if you are taking initiation, if you have taken initiation, I mean to say. And another important thing, because it's after all Kali Yuga, and we know that the whole environment is polluted, and the association is polluted, and our hearts are already polluted from previous lives even. So we have so many desires to do sinful things. What are those sinful things? We want to eat non-vegetarian foodstuffs, or we want to indulge in illicit sexual activity, or we want to gamble, or we want to take some kind of intoxication. All of these things are very sinful. They will all dampen the wood, so to speak, so that we cannot possibly light the fire of bhakti yoga. You have a damp piece of wood, you'll never light it. It has to be dry. Similarly, Krishna says at the end of chapter 7 in Bhagavad Gita, Yesham tvantagatam papam jananam punya karmanam te dvandva mohanyaramuktaha bhajante mam drhavrtaha. One can take the firm vow, so to speak, for serving Krishna, Krishna says in that verse, when one is pious. And the piety, what is the symptom of his piety? The symptom of piety is that one is free from all kinds of false misconceptions and free from bad habits and bad desires and bad association, all the pungent, ugly, degrading, debased things that conditioned souls are naturally led towards as a result of their association with the 3 modes of material nature. When we are free of this, that's called dvandva moha nirmukta, freed from the duality of bewilderment, the duality of delusion, the dualities of Maya. When we're free from that, through pious activity and pious developing a pious heart, Krishna says, then we can sustain a mature commitment to practicing pure devotional service. And the word here is commitment. It is a very strong commitment. That is another way to look at the word vrata or vow. You have to make a commitment. I will not perform these sinful activities. And I will not fail also to chant my 16 rounds of the Hare Krishna Mahamantra every single day. So this, if one keeps these vows and one is very committed in this way to executing the penance which is Bhakti Yoga, then his situation is not different from that of Lord Brahma. Lord Brahma, of course, has tremendous adhikar or qualification beyond our comprehension, beyond our imagination even. Lord Brahma is so highly qualified, but in principle, the process is the same. Whether we're a foolish newcomer who's coming from some sinful background, or whether we are already Lord Brahma, having cultivated piety and knowledge for so many births. It doesn't make any difference. In either case, we have to adopt this mindset of avyalika vrata. And by that, well, we can say avyalika vratena, by that vow of, I want to say non-hypocrisy, if you will, or honesty. That's how we worship the Lord. And it's very simple. As in Brahma's case, the Lord gives an instruction, Lord Brahma follows the instruction. Similarly, in our case, the Lord's representative gives an instruction and we follow that instruction. For example, we accept as the Lord's representative the bona fide spiritual master. Srila Prabhupada is the spiritual master for everyone in the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. So Srila Prabhupada is given this simple formula: rise early in the morning, attend the oddity in the temple, and hear the Srimad Bhagavatam in good association, take only Krishna Prasadam, follow these 4 principles, chant your 16 rounds without offense. All these things that we're doing, basic things in Bhakti Yoga, the standard rules and regulations, or the angas of bhakti that are mentioned by Rupa Goswami in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. This is the science of Bhakti Yoga, and that by our commitment and our penance in following these things as sincerely as we can, the Lord will also reveal himself to us in exactly the same way that the Lord has revealed himself to Lord Brahma. So Brahmane darshayan rupam avyalika vratadrataha. Very, very significant term in this verse. Another one here is described by Sridhar Swami, Ritam, Rita. Rita is an ancient term that we find in the Vedas. It's used in the sense of that cosmic order that sustains the universe. The same noun, Rita, later on came to imply dharma, as we hear in the Manusmriti, for example. Dharmo rakshati rakshitaha. One who maintains his dharma is thereby maintained by that dharma. But here, Sridhar Swami has said the word ritam in this context, it means satyam, truth. That the truth of Bhagavan, the actual form of Bhagavan, that was revealed to Lord Brahma by Bhagavan himself. So Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita chapter 4, we know, Janma karma chame divyam evam yoveti tatvataha. And as Prabhupada is paraphrased in his purport, in chapter 18, the same idea or a similar idea comes up. Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavan yaschasmi tatvataha. Tatvataha. If we want to know the Lord in truth, this is what we have to do. We have to understand the transcendental nature of his appearance and his activities. And how do we understand those things? That's in chapter 18, bhaktya, by devotion. So devotion really for us means commitment to following the Lord's order. Usually that order is received not directly from the Lord always, but through the Lord's pure devotee, the spiritual master. So, dharmam tu sakshat bhagavat pranitam. Just as it's stated in the 6th canto, dharma means ultimately nothing but following the Lord's instructions. If the Lord tells you to do something and you do it, that is at the same time, one and the same time, it is dharma and it is also bhakti. And by that process, when we are honestly trying to please the Lord by our own endeavors in following what he has asked of us, then we make advancement. And the Lord is very happy to reveal himself to us. So, of course, in this age, Atma Tattva Vishuddhyartham, for the purpose of purifying our conception of ourself, or purifying our mundane existence, or purifying our understanding of the Supreme Lord, however you want to take Atma Tattva. In either case, the purpose of purification is here, and it is effected simply through following the Lord's order and through serving the Lord humbly. In Kali Yuga, in this particular age, that order is general, and the order is to chant the holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It's described that Swayam eva spurati adaha. Although we cannot perceive the Lord with our blunt material senses, neither we can even conceive the Lord with our mundane minds, because our minds are so mundane. They're not at all suitable for understanding Atma Tattva, the truth of the Lord, or even the truth of ourselves. But by chanting the holy names, that Atma, that Paramatma, or that supreme spiritual being, this personality of Godhead, he will personally reveal himself when he is pleased. When he is pleased. Srimad Bhagavatam says, Shrinvatam Svakatha Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtanaha Pradyantasto Hyabhadrani Vidhunoti Sahrat Satam. Again, the idea is that when we are avyalika vratadara, when we have a commitment to honestly trying our best to fulfill the orders of the Lord as obedient servants, then the Lord reciprocates in kind. So, when we try to serve the Lord in this way, then the Lord is very happy to reveal himself to us. He purifies our mundane senses so that they become transcendentalized, as it were, like a red-hot iron. A piece of iron is something very different from fire, but when you hold it in a forge or in a fire for long enough, it practically becomes fire, even though it's not really fire. So our Atma, our mind and body, can become like that. And when they do, that's called Tatparatva Nirmala. We become as stainless as is the Lord himself. Hrishikena Hrishikesha Sevanam Bhakti Ruchyate. To take these senses and to engage them in serving the request of the Lord, serving the order of the Lord, following the instructions of the Lord. That is bhakti, when it is honest or non-duplicit, as it says here, avyalika vrata. And then the Lord will reveal himself very happily. Even though ordinarily, the Lord cannot be understood. Na bhavet grahyam indriyahi. These mundane senses cannot possibly extend to the transcendental autocrat, Lord Krishna. But by humbly serving the Lord, following his instructions, chanting his holy names especially, this is the main thing, then gradually we become awakened and we begin to see things as they are. That's here called darshayan rupam. We see the real form of the Lord even. In the beginning, we appreciate that the holy name is of the same spiritual quality as the Lord. In other words, they share the same Atma Tattva. And after some time, then we can appreciate that the Lord's name is the same as the Lord's form. And then we can begin to appreciate in more depth that the Lord, who is so named and who has such a transcendental form, he has so many wonderful qualities as well. And those qualities further reveal that the Lord is performing so many pastimes. So nama, rupa, guna, lila. These four things will reveal themselves to us by Krishna's will when he's pleased. So we were saying, Shrinvatam Sukata Krishna Punya Shravana Kirtana Hridi Antasto Hi Abhadrani Vidhunoti Suhrit Sata. We have to be, there are two qualifications given here. One of them, Sat. You have to be real. You have to be genuine. Sat means real. It also means eternal. That's where we get the word Satyam. Satyam means truth. Means, whatever. Krishna says this early on in the Bhagavad Gita also, that things that are real, they don't come to an end. And things that are not real, they cannot endure. Nasate vidyate bhavo na bhavo vidyate sataha ubhayor abhidrishtontas tvanayos tattva darshibhihi. The seers of the truth have told us that this is how it is. Things that are real, they continue forever. Things that are not real, they cannot have any ultimate. They will come to an end sooner or later. So in this world, almost everything is like that. And we're intoxicated by such temporary figures, hallucinations dancing before us for the short span of 50 or 60 years. We get so distracted, we are led to do even abominable things by these maniacal dancing illusions that so entice us. Human life is a dangerous thing. It's like a razor's edge, the Upanishads tell us. We have to be very careful to avoid the intoxication that this material energy can affect upon us. We have to take shelter of the holy name as our only business, and we have to do so by very tightly holding on to the lotus feet of the spiritual master, which means very carefully following all of his instructions, even the little ones, Prabhupada said. Every day when we are going to the temple and singing in Guru Puja, we hear, Guru Mukha Padma Bhakto Chite Te Koriya Aiko, Arana Kori Homani Asha. It means that let me make whatever is coming from my spiritual master's lotus mouth the same thing that I cherish within my heart. There should be no distinction. Not that, what he's saying is one thing, but what I want is something else. That's duplicit. That's hypocritical. That's exactly what we're talking about when we say vyalika. An honest disciple is an obedient disciple. And disciple means discipline, and discipline means penance. And it is by this penance that Brahma was able to see the Lord, because the Lord was pleased to reveal himself to Brahma. So this is all these things are all implied here by this very, very loaded term in the final line of the verse, avyalika vrata adritaha. The Lord is worshipped by this commitment, non-duplicit, honest commitment of Lord Brahma. We know, even from Bhagavad Gita also, it's described in many different ways and in different places in Bhagavad Gita. If we are just honest in our approach to the Supreme Lord and sincerely try to worship him, then the Lord gives us all the intelligence we require. Then the Lord provides what we lack and preserves what we have. The Lord provides, he leads us to the proper association that we require if we're just sincere. So this is why we chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. It's not enough to memorize the instructions of the spiritual master or to learn even all the verses of the Bhagavad Gita or the Srimad Bhagavatam. The heart has to be pure enough that we're simultaneously ready to follow those instructions, because that's usually the problem. We understand very well what to do, but we don't want to do it. This is something Duryodhana, of all people who would know. Duryodhana said this. What is that? I don't remember the Sanskrit just now, but he was in gist. He said, I know what is dharma, but I don't want to do that. And I know what is adharma, but I can't restrain myself what to do. So this is the problem. Janami adharmam nacha me nivritti, janami dharmam nacha me pravritti. This is the plight of the conditioned soul, the eternal problem of the vyalika jiva, the hypocritical, cheating jiva, that we know what we have to do, but we're not ready to do it. We just don't want to do it. Causeless unwillingness. Therefore, it's not enough to memorize the Srimad Bhagavatam. It's not enough to hear and write down and daily recite even the instructions of the spiritual master unless we follow them. And the only way that we get the strength to follow the instructions, all the instructions that we hear, is by chanting this holy name. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Bilvamangala Thakur says, this holy name is like a life preserver. If we're drowning in the ocean and someone throws us something to hold on to, that is what the holy name is. So it's a great benediction that we've received in this Kali Yuga, especially by the grace of Lord Chaitanya, who really amplified the instructions of the Vedas that implore us to chant in no uncertain terms. Hare Nama Iva Kevalam, Kalo Nasyeva Gatiranyatha Ityadi. So Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's divine grace is there. Srila Prabhupada took it upon himself to honestly dedicate himself to worshiping the Lord by the penance of following his spiritual master's instruction to preach Krishna consciousness throughout the world in the English language. As a result of Srila Prabhupada's surrender to that great mission of Lord Chaitanya that he received from his own spiritual master, now we're all having this discussion tonight. And we similarly have to make our own choice or choices about what we're going to do while we can do something in this short window of opportunity that we call human life. So the main thing is chanting. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare. Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And our vrata, our austerity, if you will, is to follow these four principles and maintain our vow to chant at least 16 rounds of this Hare Krishna Maha Mantra. And we have to avoid the 10 offenses. How in the world are we going to avoid these 10 offenses if we don't recite them or at least hear them every day? That's why in many temples we have this aspect of the morning program to recite these offenses. It has to be fresh in our minds. Otherwise, there's no way that we're going to be able to avoid them. We won't even remember what they are. We will forget where we stand and what the problem is. So we have to constantly remind ourselves. And anyway, this morning program that Srila Prabhupada has given us, Tamal Krishna Goswami has very nicely described in his book, Living Theology of Krishna Bhakti, all about Srila Prabhupada's unique contribution to the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. And he points out that all the 5 major elements of sadhana bhakti that Rupa Goswami emphasizes in his Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, they have been incorporated into the daily functions, daily temple liturgy, if you will, the morning program of the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. Sankirtan is there, hearing Bhagavatam in this good association is there, worshiping the deity is there, living in a holy place or a temple is there, etc., etc. So this is so simple. Srila Prabhupada has done all the work for us. All we have to do is hold fast to his instructions. As we said, Aruna Kari Homani Asha, without entertaining anything else, without being distracted by anything else. That much concentration we somehow have to muster. And even that we can pray for. And the Lord and his pure devotees will benedict us. Okay, so I don't want to take too much time. I'm going to end here, but these are just a few things we can think about. I'm just going to quickly summarize some of the salient points in Srila Prabhupada's purport, and then we can have some questions in just a moment. First thing Srila Prabhupada says, Atma Tattva means the science of both God and the living entity, because as we've heard, Atma can mean either one of them. And then Prabhupada points out that people have the wrong conception of each. The wrong conception of themselves is that we are the material body. And the wrong conception of the Lord is that there's no distinction between us and the Lord. Therefore, Srila Prabhupada points out the distinction, and the predecessor acharyas, as we've already heard, they also point out that distinction, very important distinction. And the Lord presented his eternal form before Brahmaji because he was fully satisfied that Brahma had discharged bhakti yoga with a strict vow, and he was non-deceptive, he was honest. That's very, very important. As long as you're honest, you will make advancement if you try in any degree to follow this process. But as soon as we are dishonest, then all hope is lost. The bull of dharma is standing only on one leg in this Kali Yuga, and that's honesty. So, Prabhupada also points out that the ultimate deception is to try to look for some system that evades this process of surrendering to following the Lord's order obediently. And so our penance consists of doing that. Brahmaji executed this penance, and therefore he saw the Lord. And Prabhupada goes so far as to say here, one can see him only by spiritualized vision after proper discharge of tapasya, or penance, in pure bhakti yoga. Then again, Prabhupada points out the distinction between the Lord's form and our form. His form is Satchidananda. Our form is Achit, Asat, Nirananda. So this is the difference. And Brahma, therefore, was told the gist of Srimad Bhagavatam in 4 essential verses, famous Chatushloki, which we will hear in coming classes. So then Prabhupada ends by glorifying the Srimad Bhagavatam and emphasizing the necessity of hearing the Srimad Bhagavatam as a regular performance of Bhakti Yoga. Here Prabhupada even says, the topic of the Srimad Bhagavatam is the science of both the Lord and the living entity. Regular reading or hearing of Srimad Bhagavatam is also performance of Bhakti Yoga. And one can attain the highest perfection simply by the association of Srimad Bhagavatam. Okay, so does anyone have any questions or any comments on any of this that we've discussed so far? We've covered a lot of stuff.
Hare Krishna, thank you so much, Shri Mukunda Prabhu. Thank you so much for such wonderful Krishna Katha. Dear devotees, if anyone may have questions, comments, realizations, you may do so. But before you do so, I would like to give a little bit further introduction of our revered speaker. As you may know, His Grace Mukunda Prabhu is a direct disciple of Jagat Guru Srila Prabhupada. And when a flower is fragrant, as soon as you get closer to the flower, you begin to understand that that flower should be somewhere around nearby. So when Prabhuji started speaking, I could understand his erudition in the Sanskrit and the Bengali language, even though he was not born a Bengali. But Prabhuji studied Bengali, and he has a very comprehensive and authentic and accurate presentation of the science of Krishna Bhakti that he teaches all over the world. And we are very much grateful to have his association, because when Prabhuji, when you were reading the sloka, there was no accent. No, like I'm speaking English, but I have an accent. Most of us we read the Sanskrit slokas, but we read them with accent. But when you were reading, there was no accent. You were reading it exactly like a typical a Sanskrit scholar or Bengali person. So before Prabhuji, you go, if there would be some time, I personally would humbly like to hear something from you about your pastimes with Srila Prabhupada. But before we do that, I have a question, and the question is about Lord Brahma, because we're talking about Lord Brahma here. Lord Brahma, as I understand in my own little understanding in Krishna consciousness, is a guna avatar of the Supreme Lord. So why is it that he is said that from Lord Brahma to the insignificant ant, everyone is suffering with their senses, and material nature is dealing with all of them. Lord Shiva is in charge of the mode of ignorance, but that does not mean that he is ignorant. Lord Brahma is in charge of the mode of passion. Should that not mean that even though he's in charge, but he's not a passionate being? So my question in brief is, why is Lord Brahma, being a guna avatar, considered to be or counted to be any of the struggling jiva atmas?
A very good question. The fact of the matter is that one can be a Shakti Avesh avatar or even a Guna avatar, and at the same time be a jiva. In the case of Lord Brahma, not in the case of Shiva, because Shiva is not jiva tattva, he has his own tattva. But Brahmaji can, sometimes Brahmaji is a liberated soul, a pure devotee, and sometimes not. There are many, many different universes and many, many different Brahmas. And there's a whole, I want to say, spectrum of qualifications that is found among these infinite Brahmas who exist within this material world. So sometimes Brahma even becomes so bewildered that he commits abominable activities. It's described like this in the Srimad Bhagavatam. So he's not necessarily the Vishnu Tattva just because he's a Guna avatar. In the same way that the spiritual master is also considered to be non-different from the Supreme Lord, but he's a jiva at the same time. So Lord Brahmaji is a jiva at the same time that he's a Guna avatar. And so sometimes, even though in his capacity as a Guna avatar, he's acting perfectly, but in his capacity as a jiva, he may be having flaws. It's described similarly that, well, Krishna describes in chapter 10 all the vibhutis of himself. You know, these are all material manifestations, but they still represent him. So he's a representation of the Supreme Lord and an avatar on behalf of the Supreme Lord, but it doesn't mean that he's completely free all the time from the modes of material nature. Sometimes he is, sometimes he isn't, because there are just so many of them. Hope that's answering your question.
Yeah, thank you so much. Your answer actually led me to, I didn't say led me to, but it hinted on the next question to the first question I asked, and that is, if Lord Brahma is not a Vishnu Tattva, it's a Jiva Tattva, and therefore he has the possibility of having flaws, then what happens when a Jiva Atma struggling in this material world is due to the flaws of Lord Brahma and not to that particular individual Jiva Atma? Or, like in the case of Yamaraj and his Yamadutas coming for living entities in this material world, they are also Jiva Tattvas. So there is a possibility that they can also make mistakes. And so what happens when Yamaraj and his Yamadutas make a mistake of snatching somebody whose time was not yet up to be snatched, then what happens? What happens in the flaws of these great personalities who are the administrators of the universe?
Very good question. Very insightful question, intelligent question. Sometimes, as Prabhupada says, he's quoting Shakespeare, there are accidents even on royal roads. You may be a demigod, but still you mess up sometimes. Look at Indra. How many times do we see Indra has messed up? So many times. So, it can happen. And they also have this saying, the bigger they are, the harder they fall. So, the more responsibility you have like that, then you have to be very careful to fulfill your responsibility, because if you mess up on a high level like that, the ramifications are so many and so strong that you can end up going to hell. What to speak of Lord Brahma? Just think of the history of King Nriga in this world. This is just, it indicates also the essential limitation of the karma kanda, that he was so perfect in fruitive activities in so many ways, and he was so pious and so highly qualified. But somehow or other, by the quirks of fate, his conditional flaws got the better of him. We all have the tendency to commit mistakes. We are illusioned from time to time. Sometimes our motives are not entirely pure, and we certainly have imperfect senses. So this is what happened to King Nriga, and he had to become a lizard for some time, despite his vast qualification, much higher than any of ours, and yet still, it can happen. But the results, the reactions, I want to say, when we're in a very hefty position of authority and we commit some mistake, then it's very, very bad. We really have to suffer as a result, because we cause suffering to so many others that we need to be sensitive of.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Shubhavanath Prabhu, please, you may unmute.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu, please accept my obeisances.
Hare Krishna.
His Grace Mukunda Dr. Prabhu Ki Jai.
Yeah.
Sadhi Mukunda Dr. Prabhu is a scholar, is one of our Indian board scholar.
Yeah.
So that may not come to your ear, but today let it come to your ear.
That is why I'm very happy he's here.
He's a great scholar.
Yes.
Prabhu, I like your emphasis on the Sanskrit words, which you really emphasize on, that deals with what we say in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Kutinati. I'm sure we Mahaprabhu Kutinati, duplicity. I'm sure it was maybe Rupa Srila Rupa Goswami, where Mahaprabhu was instructing him. He told that these are some of the things that check one's bhakti, that one should try to give us, kutinati, because he described it as a kind of a grass that grows along the bhakti, that if one is not careful, he might brush both the bhakti's latter and this particular, quality, which is not very healthy for spiritual life. Prabhu, but if we take a look, a very good survey today in our institution, we see majority of devotees, they are so much tied up with this kutinati. So how do we check? How do we fix it that this is bhakti, this is not bhakti? Since it's one of the factors which Mahaprabhu said one should try to avoid, but it's very paramount. If you speak with about 10, 15 people or 10, 15 devotees, you see that 8, 9, 10, 11, 12 devotees, they all have this idea of kutinati in their words. So one will ask, where is the place of bhakti then? So this is my question, Prabhu.
I think, in effect, you're answering how to avoid this tendency, no? Kutinati.
Yeah, perhaps maybe it will streamline the question.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that we're all conditioned souls, and it's expected that these things will be there in the beginning. But it is not expected that they will stay there, which means you have to root them out. Now, fortunately for us, there's no great secret, or there's no esoteric, special process by which you can do this. Srila Prabhupada has given us everything in the simple process of bhakti yoga that we've been describing. The problem is that people don't do it. Simple enough. I mean, we have only, as I said, chant our japa nicely, and we have to follow the principles that we vow to follow, and we have to stick to the morning program that practically every single letter that Srila Prabhupada wrote emphasizes. And, that's really all we have to do. But the problem is that people don't do it. They don't take it seriously. People are thinking that let me concoct my own program, a little bit mixed with something else. And, that's why they have trouble with these kinds of anarthas year after year after year. If we just simply hear and follow what the spiritual master instructs us to do, then all the problems will be very quickly erased. But you can lead a horse to water, but you cannot make that horse drink. This is the problem. That's why I said, Guru Mukha Padma Bhakya Chitete Koryaikya, Arona Korihimani Asha. We are instructed, like we hear this every single day, but do we do it? That's the question. Is it, do we have time to discuss gossip with other people instead of the orders of the spiritual master? I think so. What can you do? It's not Krishna's fault. It's not anyone else's fault. We ourselves make the choice at every moment. Am I going to serve Krishna, or am I going to serve Maya? So, we just have to try to more strictly follow what we're already doing, but more seriously. If you study Srila Prabhupada's letters, his correspondence, and to some degree also his conversations, you will find that again and again and again and again and again, and yet again, Srila Prabhupada emphasizes two things. One of them, just be serious, and two, be sincere. These two things. Be serious and be sincere. That's really all we have to do. We know what the spiritual master has told us. We just have to be serious enough and sincere enough to do it. Simple as that. Is it clear enough?
Yeah, thank you.
And then very quickly, all these ugly things within the heart that we hear about in the pastime of Gundacham Arjun, for example, you're referring to that purport. So these things will be very quickly taken away. Sarvan Harati Chittasto Bhagavan Purushottama. Same idea that we mentioned in Srinvatam Sukhata Krishna. The Lord himself within the heart, when he sees, okay, this person is now serious and sincere. He's taken up this vrata, avyalika vrata, and he's worshipped me sincerely, so then I'll free him from all these anarthas. That's how it happens. Not by our endeavors, but by the Lord's mercy. Okay?
All right, Prabhu.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for the answer. In fact, Tribhuvannath Prabhu's question and the answer you gave to his question, Prabhuji, is actually linking us to a very important and very concerning need, especially in West Africa. Because yesterday there was this question raised in our Sangha on this same platform that, especially in West Africa, of course, not limited to West Africa, but prominently in West Africa, because in West Africa, there are lots of people who follow their inborn traditions and cultures. Yeah, traditions they were born into. And some of these traditions are very similar to devotional service practices. And therefore, sometimes some devotees continue to practice their past familial traditions and cultures alongside a devotional service. And they think that one cannot undo their cultures. Their culture has to be dovetailed in the service of Guru and Krishna. And some of us see this to be a danger, if not now, but in the very near future, when a devotional service is practiced in some sort of alloyed manner, not unalloyed, because alloyed is like it's mixed, like you were saying. We don't have to mix, but here now it is mixed because we are mixing our culture and tradition with Krishna consciousness. Now, what is the best advice you could offer to some of us who think that we do not need to shun our traditions, we do not need to shun our cultures, we just have to dovetail them in the service of Guru and Krishna, which may not be so flexible or even possible to blend together. Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Okay, another very good question, intelligent, practical, germane question. Well, you know, the answer to every question of this nature regarding anartha nivritti is always the same. We just sincerely continue the practice of Krishna consciousness, and gradually all these things will become washed away. They may take some time. That's normal. It's expected. It's natural. But one should use one's intelligence, and one should refine one's intelligence also to understand things in the proper perspective, because that's the definition of intelligence, to see what is what and who is who. And this is called viveka in Sanskrit, discrimination. And that kind of keen discrimination is actually the hallmark of the Madhyam Adhikar status. The Kanishta Adhikari cannot distinguish subtle things that seem to be, you know, he conflates a lot of things. And he's not able to distinguish things that will benefit him in the long term from things that won't. And the Uttama Adhikari doesn't have to worry about these things because he's way beyond it. But for those of us in the middle, we have to employ very keen discrimination, and that discrimination always has to be based on the explicit instructions of the spiritual master, the sadhus, and the shastras, and those traditions that we receive these three in. So that's described by Krishna in the 11th canto. 4 pramans he gives there: Shruti, Pratyaksham, Aitihyam, Anumanam. So that's one thing. Another thing is that about 30 years ago, one very popular sannyasi from the Gaudiya Math, who had some association in the past with Srila Prabhupada, he became very influential within ISKCON, and so many people were going to hear from him. Even the leaders of our society, some of them were going to hear from him. And, you know, many, even Prabhupada's disciples and senior devotees were saying that, you know, there's no difference between what he's saying and what Prabhupada is saying. I'm mentioning this because it's analogous to the point that you brought up. And Tamal Krishna Goswami was one of those devotees. And eventually, with a little prodding from the GBC, he saw that, it actually wasn't so good to go and hear so much from this person. And so he gave it up. And, he told me personally that in mathematics, for example, you may have two parallel lines, but those parallel lines are absolutely parallel. That's important.
Yes.
If they're not absolutely parallel, then they may look to be the same thing, and they may continue for many years to look to be the same thing.
Yes.
But gradually, after infinite scope and time, they're miles and miles apart.
Away. Yeah.
So this is an important thing. This is why we adopt a somewhat fanatical stance, which for the third time I'm going to repeat, Guru Mukha Padma Vakya Chite Te Koriya Aikyo. Outside of the grammatical framework of the instructions that we receive from Srila Prabhupada, we don't know how to interpret anything. So it's very important to stick to that principle. And equally important is to recognize that the instructions of the spiritual master themselves are not independent of the Shastra or the Guru Parampara. I mean, the tradition as a whole. And in Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Lila, chapter 15, maybe, I don't remember the text number, maybe 250 or something like that. Srila Prabhupada mentions in his purport there that of these three, the real center is the Shastra Yonitvat. And that's why we have to address the society-wide pan-ISKCON phenomena that people don't read Prabhupada's books. When you're reading Srila Prabhupada's books, nobody can pull the wool over your eyes.
No way.
Because Prabhupada is so clear and so emphatic and so forceful about whatever he says that it is just impossible. The only way that people are misled or become confused or bewildered is because they're not hearing from the spiritual master, and they're not hearing from Srila Prabhupada in particular. That's why I've emphasized this verse that we sing every day at Guru Puja 3 times, because it is so important. Without Srila Prabhupada, we're all lost, and we will remain lost as to the extent that we are without Srila Prabhupada. But as long as we stay tight and hold tight to Srila Prabhupada's words, then we will always be in a good situation. We will always make advancement.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for the answer. I think Krishna is striking a chord here because you are like the 4th or 5th devotee stressing on the importance of reading and studying Srila Prabhupada's books.
It's a great disease throughout the world right now that people are neglecting that. It should not be so. Prabhupada recognized that tendency even in the 1970s, and he criticized that tendency. There are not many things that Prabhupada criticized about his own disciples, but that's one of them. He always used to say that you people think that the books are only for selling, but not for reading.
So I think Srila Prabhupada and Sri Krishna are trying to remind us of this important thing in our devotional service. Tribhuvannath Prabhu, please, you may unmute.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. It is not a question; it's just a contribution because you have raised the question that has reminded me of what Prabhuji have just again reiterate, which is using the eyes of the Sadhu Sastra and Guru to check things. I have experience with somebody, recount for me about maybe 6 months or 7 months I spent in West Africa. We are discussing something which actually brought out this particular experience from a devotee. The experience concerns His Holiness Bhakti Tita Swami. Generally, in West Africa, there are many different type of belief and worship. So His Holiness Bhakti Tita Swami, according to this devotee, has has cultivated a devotee who has Olokun. Prabhuji may not know the idea of Olokun. Olokun is the ancestor of the water. So this devotee has Olokun. So after getting more involved in the teaching of Krishna consciousness through the mercy of His Holiness Bhakti Tita Swami, so one time he has approached Bhakti Tita Swami that he has this family heritage of the divinity Olokun. What should he do with the deity? So did he go? Will he go and throw the deity inside the water where it comes from, or what should he do with the deity? So he was finding out this. He was finding out this question so that he can know what to do with the deity. So he said, according to this devotee, Bhaktisiddhanta Swami told, no, don't throw away. Just continue with your devotional service. At the right time, the right thing will be done. So this devotee stick to the word of the spiritual master. He was following, really following according to this devotee, chanting and associating with devotee. So this devotee said at one point in his life, somebody actually came to take this divinity from him. This is how he get rid of that divinity. Yeah. Today he's still a devotee. So I'm just saying this because of what Prabhuji have said, sticking to the instruction of the spiritual master has a lot of role, to play in our life. Thank you, Prabhu.
Yes. I have similar experience in South India. I went to the biggest temple of Skanda in South India, and I was staying in the neighborhood of all the pujaris of this demigod. And we did a program there, and so many people were coming, but all of them, virtually every single one of them, they were all from families of the priests of this temple. And so they were all hardcore committed to Lord Skanda, Murugan. So one girl raised her hand at the end of the question and said, so, tell me, is Krishna the supreme or is Murugan the supreme? Skanda. So it was kind of a tough spot for me to have to answer that question. I told her, you just go to the temple of Skanda and you pray like you've never prayed before, that he gives you the proper guidance to understand who is the supreme. And he'll do so, period. And I have lost track of the number of devotees who were previously worshiping other demigods. And, it's kind of like what you're talking about. Mm-hmm. If you just adopt this process, then they will guide you appropriately. And they will invariably tell you to worship Krishna as the Supreme Lord, because even Lord Shiva says that's the best worship. And Skanda is his son. So, yeah. Again, it's nothing really different than what we already know from Srila Prabhupada. We just chant Hare Krishna, we read Prabhupada's books, and we follow this process, and then gradually, all the direction for further advancement will be given to us. It's automatic, as it were. Yeah. But it's not automatic. It's actually mercy, and it comes commensurate to our level of surrender, non-duplicit penance, I mean to say, and then Krishna will enlighten us according to our desire. All right. I think
Thank you so much, Prabhuji, for the enlightenment. Prabhuji, are you speaking from India? It must be late for you.
Yeah, it's 10 o'clock at night.
Yes, it's late. It's late. Yeah, well, thank you so much. We are receiving Vrindavan in our various homes. That is so beautiful. We are very grateful to their lordships for sending all of you to us and sharing your love and wisdom with us. So, dear devotees, we're going to humbly request you all to unmute, and we all chant Hare Krishna Maha Mantra to express our appreciation to our revered speaker, His Grace Mukunda Datta Prabhu. Prabhuji, next time we have you, by Guru Krishna's grace, like I said, we would like to hear from you a little bit of your pastimes with Srila Prabhupada. It's quite late now, so we may not be able to today. So next time. So devotees, please, you may unmute and we chant Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna,
Krishna,
Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
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 Hari,
Hare,
Hari.
Hare. Vancha kalpatarishya,
Kalpatarushya, Kripa Sindhuya Devasya.
Patitanam
Pavanebhyo,
Pavanebhyo,
Vaishnavebhyo, Namo Namaha.
all glories to His Grace Mukunda Dat Prabhu Ki Jai. Hare Krishna, Hare Hare
Jai
Bol.
Prabhupada, Jai Gaur Bhaktivinoda Ki Jai, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.